And it's a very good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel, our last show for 2023, and great to see Dan Butley back in action. Dan, we might go to you first. Big problems with college football playoff. 5 into 4 won't go, and they found that out.
Yeah, it's crazy how they've talked about the expansion of the college football playoff, but it won't happen this year. It'll happen next year. So when you've got multiple teams that are really good and you only have 4 slots available and you use metrics and analytics, but it's really a 13-person committee that puts together the 4 teams. They're tasked with putting the 4 best teams in as they use the eye test. And obviously a Florida State University team that was undefeated and in a major college conference, such as the Atlantic Coast Conference, does not get in, creates some pretty serious controversy here in the United States. First time ever, an undefeated champ from a conference that is one of the Power 5 conferences did not get in.
And that's created a fair few headlines, including some threats of legal action.
A lot of legal action. It seems like the 2-word middle name of the NCAA or even the college football playoff right now. Anything the NCAA or the CFP puts forth is threatened with legal action. But, Mark, it is interesting. Obviously, as you said, there's 5 teams for 4 slots. When you looked at it, I mean, even Georgia as a 6th team was the number 1 team all season long, lost in their conference football championship game to Alabama. Georgia probably has a good argument for being one of the top 4 teams as well, but they really focus on Florida State not getting in. And it brings up a good question here, Mark, as you look at, was it the right decision? Part of us, could look at it as well. Should Michigan be in the college football playoff? Should it had been a penalty with Jim Harbaugh being suspended 6 of the 12 games this year, their head coach? Could it have potentially been Michigan that would have been left out? So some interesting dynamics here.
Dan, do I take it that that decision is a subjective decision by this committee of 13 and not an objective decision, which just about every sport decision is made on? Who crossed the line first wins, who won the most points wins. Is that what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, they look at all the analytics, all the data that's provided to them, strength of record, strength of schedule, all the different things that they're provided. But ultimately, it comes down to the people in the room. And the people in the room ultimately have to vote on the 4 teams that they think are the best. They take each team individually. Michigan was first, then Washington. Then you looked at Texas, who had 1 loss. Then they chose Alabama, who had just beat the number 1 team, Georgia, with 1 loss. And then you got Florida State was the 5th team with no losses. What they believed, Judge, was that Florida State, having lost their top quarterback for the season just recently, wasn't as good as the 4 teams that they placed in there, was not as good as an Alabama team who had gotten beat by Texas earlier in the year. So interestingly, as unfortunately the quarterback indicated, I wish I would have gotten hurt earlier in the season to show that this Florida State team is good without me. But unfortunately, he got injured late in the season, and it just wasn't enough for the committee to use the eye test to say that Florida State was one of the top 4 teams.
Dan, the panelist 13, are they collegiate? Are they from the colleges, or are they an independent group of people?
Each from the conferences that are in the Power 5, the group of the FBS conferences. So there's 10 FBS conferences. There's 5 conferences that are considered Power 5 conferences, and then there's 5 conferences that make up the football bowl subdivision. They create the board of the CFP board of managers, and then there's a couple of independent members of the board of managers as well. So generally, the individual that is in the conference, such as the ACC, would not vote on the teams getting in from the ACC. But it's a little bit different here with the college football playoff system. They need all the votes they can get to try to tabulate this thing correctly.
Just a quick one. Do the members who vote, if they went to one of these colleges, do they excuse themselves from the voting on that team?
They're supposed to, Paul. Yes, correct. I mean, obviously not in the room, but that's part of the rules that they have, is that, I don't know the exact phrase of it, but yeah, if you went to that institution and you're in there trying to push that institution, it's not fair to the rest of the process.
Yeah.
One of the things that they take into account, Dan, and you mentioned it with respect to Florida State's quarterback, is that the committee can take into account key players who may not be available for the postseason, which might affect that team's performance. That just seems like a terribly long bow to draw to say, oh, well, in that case, you shouldn't get in because we don't think if you get in there, you won't win. It means that, well, it sort of means that your past record means nothing.
Exactly. That's part of it. I mean, obviously the second string quarterback got injured, so they were down to the third string quarterback. But when you look at this, there's literally almost a month between the time that they choose the teams to the time they play their first game in the college football playoff bowl game. So the second string quarterback would have been healthy enough to be able to start the bowl game. And that quarterback would have had plenty of time to prep, full preparation for this bowl game against the opponent they're going to play. So it's and it would have been Michigan as the number 1 overall seed. So it is unfortunate that's the direction that they took. But obviously Alabama is an exceptionally good team. Georgia was an exceptionally good team as well. Florida State was right there. Just the committee just thought Alabama beating Georgia was a much better win than Florida State beating Louisville in the ACC championship game.
And Florida State, are they been consistently up there, or is this sort of an out of the box? Because do they take that into consideration as well?
No, they take it season by season. Obviously, Florida State's been one of the top 20 programs probably in college history in many ways. They've always been consistently good. They have great recruiting classes and generally have some pretty good success in the ACC and in college football overall. So they take it season by season, not necessarily what they've done historically.
So, Dan, has Michigan drawn the short straw, jumping to number 1, and now going to have to play Alabama in a sudden death playoff?
I think Michigan's going to have a tough time. Obviously, Michigan undefeated, has beaten some really good teams this year. Jim Harbaugh, as I indicated, their head coach, has had his controversy this year, being suspended for the first 3 games of the season and then the last 3 games of the season because of the sign stealing issues in the last 3 games of the season. But Alabama is playing exceptionally well. They lost to Texas early in the year. Texas is the number 3 seed going to this, but I would not want to play Nick Saban with a month of preparation time if I'm Michigan.
Okay, Dan. Well, I might save it till later in the program to ask you whether or not or who you think might win that playoff series. But we're fortunate enough to have Madeline Kelly with us this morning. She's been cheerleading for 12 years. Been to the World Championship.
Sorry.
G'day,
Had a few
Madeline.
technical difficulties.
That's all right. You're with us now. That's the main thing.
Yep.
Okay. As I was saying, been cheerleading for 12 years. You've been to the World Championships on 3 occasions, and you're off to the 2024 Championships at Disney World Resort in Orlando, Florida next year.
Yes, sure am. Just came back from Nationals and we came first, national champions. So qualified for Worlds and I think back on the training grind and ready for April.
And
So
what got you into cheerleading to start with?
I started off with gymnastics and I did it for about probably 10 years and it just got, they asked me to go like elite and I was like, I just don't know if I love it that much. So I decided, I might just give it up. So then I took a few months where I just didn't really do anything and I was like, I should probably try something else. And then one of my friends was like, why don't you try cheerleading? One of my cousins does it. And I was like, I've never heard of that before because it's very quite a niche sport really. So I was like, I'll give it a try. So I signed up for a club and here I am. So yeah.
Maddie,
You've got,
nice to see you, Maddie. Listen,
You too, Jack.
you're obviously from Perth too. So is the
Yes.
Perth cheer environment pretty bit hot over there, pretty big over there?
Yeah, well, it's when I first started back in 2011, it was very small, but it's grown to be very, very big. It's not as big as the East Coast. East Coast is still a lot bigger, but it's definitely grown, and it's definitely becoming a lot more recognised and a lot more well known, which is really good for our sport, because we're always wanting more people to like know about the sport and get involved. We definitely have a lot more girls. East Coast have quite a few more boys than the West Coast does, but we're trying to get more boys into the sport, but it's a bit tricky. Perth is very small, and so
I think it surprised some people to know that many boys are actually doing cheer, but as I understand it, you need boys in your team. And by the way, I've seen your team, and if anyone wants to see the videos of your team, it's sensational. But tell us a bit about how many members you've got in your team and how often you train.
So we've got 24 members on our team, and then we've got 2 alternates who are also on the team, and they come to training, but they're not actually on the floor. So they just are there in case anyone gets injured or hurt or needs to sub in and out. And so there's 24 of us. We train 4 times a week. And then we have to do 2 extra strength and conditioning workouts outside of that. So it's pretty much takes up a lot of our time. Cheerleading is our whole life, basically. But we all love it. And we're with all of our friends for basically 4 times a week. We train for 2.5 to 3 hours each session. And we're basically just like a huge family, but we sometimes do fight like brothers and sisters, but that's just the way it is. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I live and breathe cheerleading, and it's basically my life. And the 23 other people on the mat is also my life as well. So yeah, I love it.
It's a very poorly paid life, Maddie.
It is very poorly paid. We self-fund everything, and cheerleading is a very expensive sport. Term fees are probably like definitely not something that probably like $600 a term, and then there's 4 terms, and then you've got competition fees, uniforms about $300, and then you've got all the makeup.
Trips to Orlando, Florida wouldn't be cheap too, I wouldn't think.
No, pre-COVID was doable. But post-COVID, it's definitely take a huge hit to the bank account. But it's very difficult because in Canada and the US, they get fully paid bids, where basically all of their accommodation, entry fees and everything are paid for, and they just have to pay for their flights. But here in Australia, no one actually gives out full paid bids to the World Championships. You just have to qualify, and then only your competition entry is paid for. So we're really trying in the International Cheer Union to get fully paid bids to come to Australia, but it's a lot of behind the scenes process that.
You mentioned you got 2 alternates, and that's obviously for injuries. What are the sort of injuries that you see in cheer?
Well, actually this year in April, when we went to Worlds, one of the girls was training. We were training the day before we were competing, and she was just doing a round off handspring, nothing even, that probably makes no sense to anyone who has no idea what flipping means. She was just doing a basic flip, and she just landed perfectly fine, and she broke her ankle in 3 places the day before we were going to go on the world stage. So thank goodness for our alternates, because they had to come in and basically they knew basically what they were doing, but had to rearrange everything that we were doing and put slot people into places. And it was really unfortunate for her, and we really felt for her because it was her first time at the Worlds. She'd never been before. So that was really, really difficult for her, and she was devastated. But we just obviously had to, the show must go on, and we had to fit her in and change some people around, and very stressful. but we made it work. And so we really have to have alternates because, I mean, things happen on the day and you've just got to slot into the routine like nothing's ever happened.
Maddie, I've watched your routine. I don't know how to describe it other than it's like floor gymnastics on steroids. And there's just people everywhere, not just throwing people up in the air, but they're doing those backward flips, which I just find incredible. You're all doing them. How can people watch you? What should they look for on, I don't know, YouTube or all those other things I don't do, but how can they find you? Let's look at your team.
So we do have an Instagram page, and that I can share the link to. Sorry?
And what's it called? How would you find?
Oh, it's called Nukestagram, because the team that I'm on is called Nukes. So Nukes and Instagram, we put it together and we thought Nukestagram. So we've got that. We do have I think TNT, the whole club, has a YouTube channel, and I think they just post routines on there from the whole club. So we've got like the mini ones, and then we've got the tinies, the senior and open. So we currently have, I think, 45 teams in our club. So they'll all be uploaded to the YouTube, and that's how you watch basically everyone from TNT.
Sorry, I was going to say, hi, Maddie. We've got Dan on the show. He's very established in college sports in America. How would you compare our standard in Australia to America, where it's obviously more established and a lot more participants? Are we catching up, and what ways are you doing do you look there for inspiration?
Yeah, we definitely do. So college cheer is a little bit different to all-star cheer, but obviously a lot of the athletes filter in from all-star cheerleading into the college cheer world. The college cheer that we have, our universities don't really do cheerleading. It's, if they do, it's level like quite basic, level 1 and 2. Whereas the colleges in America are really like top-notch, and they've got level 5, 6, 7 skills that they're throwing in. All of their athletes have basically filtered through an all-star cheerleading program. So we don't actually have that here in Australia, which hopefully we've got some basic teams. So hopefully in the future that will be able to grow. Obviously it's going to be quite slow, and we've got a lot of catching up to do in terms of Americans, because they're just insane. They're on the go all the time.
No, you're right the first time. They're insane. Dan, I think it'd be great if you got in contact with Maddie at some point, and when she was over there, I don't know, maybe you can make contact with Maddie and just show us some of the things that your conference is doing, or your people that you know are doing in cheer.
Yeah, Maddie, it's great to meet you. I wish I was there to meet you in person, but here in America, I mean, my daughter's been involved with cheerleading. She's finally aged out here a bit. Too many injuries and too many concussions as a flyer. Yep. She's the one that gets thrown up in the air during all the stunts and those type of things. So hence some of these teddy bears that are behind me are some of the things that people gave her during the years. So it's like, yeah, why are these teddy bears? That's part of it, because cheerleading type stuff. But she's now working full time, but I think she misses the gymnastics aspect of it. I mean, there's so much athleticism, so many things they have to go into it. Rhythmic gymnastics, obviously acrobatics, everything that goes into it to make sure that you're doing things right. And everybody's got to be on time to hit your routine, to do everything that it takes to place. But I'll tell you, we were talking about Disney World earlier on here. The Nationals here at Disney World in Orlando are must-watch TV on ESPN. The collegiate championships, the high school championships, I mean, they just dominate the facilities down there. So it's great to meet you. So many things going on in the cheerleading space. But yeah, college cheerleading, it's obviously extremely competitive to get into the top programs, and hard to stay in that spot once you're in that spot.
Yeah, definitely.
So Maddie, how would say so that the cheerleaders, if there is such a thing as a typical career, Dan was mentioning injuries for the Flyers, but what's a typical career of a cheerleader?
So basically, a lot of the athletes obviously go up into the senior age groups. So when they're 18, and then they age out of the senior age group, and that's when they usually go collegiate cheer, or they can super senior and do another year. But apart from that, you have to go to an open team, which is 14 plus. And in Australia, you can only go to Worlds currently if you're in an open team. I think that changes next year. They can be on a senior team, and we can take senior teams internationally. But for the past cheerleading career, you can only take open teams in Australia. So you can't take any senior teams, which has been a bit difficult because you have to be over 14 to be on a senior team. So that's been a little bit limiting in the terms of like the athletes that we can take, because we do have a lot of younger athletes who have the talent, but obviously aren't old enough to be on an open team. So we've got to cater for that and make sure that we're building a strong foundation so that the future of our program hopefully leads into being on an open team and making the World's team. But it's definitely a little bit different to the American teams who mainly compete in the senior divisions.
I was just going to ask, Dan, do each of the colleges in your conference have cheerleading teams?
Yeah, pretty much all of them do in some form or fashion. I mean, obviously, we don't have college football in the Big West. We're much more focused on games at the basketball side of things. Obviously, the college football programs have much greater, much larger size cheerleading programs than the Big West does. But yes, we definitely have cheerleaders in the league.
And do your institutions offer scholarships for being in cheerleading?
Not yet. No, I know there's a new NCAA sports coming online, particularly one called Stunt, that tries to take into some of the opportunities that exist in the cheerleading and gymnastics space and create a new sport in the NCAA called Stunt. Not too many cheerleading programs in the NCAA offer scholarships, but Stunt is one that they're trying to develop to try to create more opportunities for women that have been in cheerleading.
I guess a question for you, Maddie. Where do you see all this going as far as you're concerned? How long do you think you'll stay in the sport?
So I'm 27, so I'm not sure how many years I've got left in me. In terms of cheerleading, it's quite demanding on the body, and there's a lot of injuries. I think last year I broke my foot, but not even cheerleading related. I was just walking and tripped on a curb on the footpath and broke my foot in two places. So I had to have surgery on that. So that's put me back quite a bit. But getting back into it has been like really good because I missed it so much. It was really hard not being able to be on the floor and doing the routine with all my friends. Hopefully I've had a few friends actually that have gone to I'm not sure if you know Dan, but it's Dodge City, and so I've had a few friends go to Dodge City to be on their cheerleading team. So I've had two friends go and do that. One's still over there at the moment for her third season over there, and they really enjoyed it and they loved it. I'm pretty sure they're on a scholarship, but I'm not entirely sure how that all worked. But hopefully more people can offer international scholarships and things like that for cheerleaders. And I've had a few people that I know over East go to Weber State, which is one of the best obviously there, and so we've got quite a good tie with Weber, the Australian cheerleading community, but not I mean that's probably the only two that I know where we've had Australians go and be on their team. So I probably won't ever make a college cheerleading team in America. I think my days are probably have maybe 2 or 3 more years in me. And then I'll still coach and I'll still be involved, but I think my body might need to just be like, take a break.
But perhaps finally from me, Maddie, given the elite level that you're competing at, obviously because you're going to Worlds, how difficult it is for you to fit in training and all those things with your just general daily life and work?
Yeah, so I am a teacher. So I teach basically during the day, and then in the afternoons I coach for a little bit usually before I train. So I train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays. And then, so that's all in the afternoon. So I usually finish training about 9:30 p.m. And then I get home about 10 and then try and wind down, because it takes me a bit to wind down from flipping and throwing and catching, and then just chilling and having a shower before I'm ready to go to bed. And then I get up, go to school, teach for the next 8 hours, and then do the same thing on my Wednesdays and Sundays on my day off where I'm not at the gym. I usually do one of the strength classes, and then so you can do whatever you choose, as long as it's recorded on like a watch or on your phone or something, and then you have to send it in, so that everyone's accountable for their 2 extra workouts. So I usually go for a run on one of them, and then the other one I usually do some type of strength with weights and stuff at the gym, usually on a Sunday, and then Wednesday I go for my run. But I have to give up a lot. I can't attend a lot of events or dinners and things like that during the week, because obviously I've got training on all those days. And even if it's on my day off, I don't have time to fit in my strength workout, I have to say, I can't come to dinner, I have to do my strength. And then, so it is a big life commitment, but and I have given up a lot for it, but I wouldn't have it any other way. But it's definitely consumed a lot of my life. But it's some days I'm like, oh, I'm so tired, but just get up, keep going, and on the grind of the world. So
I think I'd call that a huge commitment, Maddie. Huge.
I was going to ask, Maddie, what's more stressful, the children you teach or being a couple of metres up in the air and hoping someone will catch you?
I actually throw them and catch them. So I like to be on the ground. I definitely like to be in the air. I like to be in control. So, I mean, teaching the kids is definitely up there. But then all of our flyers are usually pretty good, and I definitely know how to catch them. But sometimes they do some crazy things up there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, put your arms in, because I'm not going to catch you because you're going to elbow me in your face. Or
would they go off script up in the air?
Yeah, when rogue. I throw them, sometimes they go rogue and.
If there's one place I'd follow instructions, it's when I'm 2 metres in the air. I'll tell you that much.
Definitely. It definitely happens when we're trying a new skill, or they're trying to twist while they're in the air, and you've got arms going everywhere. And
you haven't met me.
But we always catch them. We definitely cop it sometimes. That's for sure.
All right, there's one thing on your CV that I did like, and I must ask you, Maddie, that you competed at the 2021 virtual World Championships, and that would have been due to COVID. Just how did that work out?
So it was very interesting. It was a very difficult time, obviously, for us and everyone else in the world. So we basically have to live stream in to, or you have to video, but it has to be in like a certain setting at a certain time. And so basically we just had to go into our cheerleading gym, full like outfits, makeup. We had a few family and friends come and watch, but but it definitely didn't have the atmosphere and that, like, if you go to Disney World Orlando at any point when there's a cheerleading competition, it's just like absolutely insane. There's thousands of people, everyone's cheering on everyone, like the crowd's insane. So that was we found that quite difficult because obviously we just had our family and friends, and a lot of the time when you're on the floor you really feed off the crowd, and you have people to perform to and engage with, and it was very difficult because the judges weren't there. So that was quite difficult. We it was very like I don't know, it was a very strange concept, and we felt quite detached from everything because we're obviously so isolated in Australia anyway, and then obviously trying to video and film and then like send it away. It was just a very different experience to what we had all experienced before, but everyone else did the same thing in America as well, so we all just hopped on, and definitely a unique experience. And I don't think, hopefully there'll be no other pandemic ever in my lifetime, so we'll never have to do it again, but it was definitely a very unique experience, and one that definitely taught us that it doesn't matter if there is a crowd or if there isn't a crowd, we've just got to make it work because we're the only ones on the floor that can put it all together. So yeah, but it was very, very
Surreal.
Yeah, it was interesting experience.
Yeah. Well, one, as you said, we hope we don't have to go through again. Look, we at the Sportsfan Radio panel wish you all the best for next year in the Worlds. Really hope you do
Thank
well.
you.
And thanks for being on the program today. And when you come back after the Worlds, we might get you back on to let us know how you went.
Absolutely. That would be amazing. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks,
It's been
Maddie.
a pleasure.
Stay healthy, Maddie.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Same to you.
Bye.
All right, Dan, we might come back to you and just continue with that college football playoffs. We've got Michigan playing Alabama and Washington playing Texas. Just give us your two winners and then who'll win the big one.
I'll take the underdogs or the lower seeds mark in this one. I like the way Texas is playing. I think Washington, we're waiting for the Heisman Trophy to be announced yet. Penix, the quarterback at Washington, is extremely good, but I like what Texas is doing this season. I like Texas over Washington. I think the Big 12 is a little bit tougher than the Pac-12 was this year. Also, I'll take Alabama over Michigan. I just think Alabama is playing exceptionally well, having beaten number one Georgia last week. And again, Nick Saban, the head coach at Alabama, having a month to prepare, Mark. I would not want to be the team that faces that team in Alabama. So I'll take Alabama and Texas in the national championship game.
And who's going to win that one?
Ooh, tough one to call at this point. If I had to go with my gut, I'd probably say Texas beats Alabama. A little bit less preparation time. The head coach at Texas knows the head coach at Alabama very well, having worked for him. So I just want to see somebody different win the national championship, and I'd like to see Texas win that.
Well, and they've already beaten them this season already.
Yes, they have. Yes, they have. So it's why I tend to favor it. And a little bit less prep time for Nick Saban in that one.
All right, thanks, Dan. Paul, NRL update. Couldn't be any bigger news than Michael Maguire being appointed as the coach of the New South Wales State of Origin team.
Yeah, very interesting that F-bomb Maguire, who had that documentary where there was so many F-bombs dropped. I don't know how he got any strategy across to the players, but he obviously must have some coaching now. Interestingly, they did call Craig Bellamy to sound him out, but he did say, not that this is my last year at the Storm, that we've heard that very often, but he wants to focus his attention on the Storm. But it seems that everyone in the game has backed the appointment of Maguire. He did break the long 40-year-old premiership drought at my club, the Rabbitohs, so we give him credit for that. He also recently beat Australia 30-0 in charge of the Kiwi side, so that has to have enormous kudos. I think what's most important in terms of assessing the prospects is that we're not too big an outsider, at least in the betting markets, for the upcoming State of Origin series. So we're actually quite short $1.60 favourites for game one. So it's not as if they've just had to run out of candidates and let's throw him in and we'll see how he goes. He's actually predicted to stop the run of Billy Slater, which is no mean feat given that Queensland side, and we know how much of a football genius Billy Slater is.
And he's already appointed his deputies as well, Matt King and Brett White being two of them.
Yes, so that's the thing we've got going, is that there's a lot of Storm flavour at that setup. So Craig Bellamy quite sagely pointed out that there's a very large flavour at the Blues of the Storm without him having to be there. I just think Craig Bellamy realises that it could be probably a damaging thing to his legacy if he does step in and it's a disaster. And it's time to back Maguire, who's without a coach. I do agree, by the way, with the stance of New Zealand. Maguire thought he could juggle the New Zealand and the New South Wales roles. You've got to understand that coaching the New South Wales players would then progress them through to Australia, and they'd then be playing New Zealand. So that's got to be a conflict of interest. If you're progressing a player's career to then take on your other employer, I think that New Zealand was right to say pick one or the other.
All right, Paul, one that really interests me and one of the craziest things to happen, Bulldogs Connor Tracy suffers an ankle injury at his last training session at the Sharks before he crosses to the Bulldogs. He'll miss the first 6 weeks of the season. Now, why wouldn't you put somebody in cotton wool until he got to your club?
Oh, well, it just seems that they're cursed, the Dogs. I tell you what, I thought you were going to mention this as one of the craziest things you've seen, because he's about to be named as the New Zealand coach, apparently. He could be older than Yoda when he gets that gig, Wayne Bennett, but he just keeps popping up at new roles. And I do love this book, The Wolf You Feed. We don't give many plugs on this show, but he's quite a man and he seems to get it done wherever he is. But your Dogs can't catch a break. All puns excused there, Professor. If you could pick up Jerome Luai, which there is word growing, you're a big chance, given all the Panthers connections at the Bulldogs and, of course, the maestro Gus Gould. If that happens, you suddenly get into top 8 reckoning if you can get Jerome Luai. Where the money comes from, I don't know. But Gus Gould has a way of getting his man. And, take that the right way.
Paul, is there a sombrero now out Belmore Road, is there?
Well, you're almost... The thing is that the Roosters, when they had the sombrero, were going pretty well, but the Dogs just can't catch a break. So all this money they're spending, I think the questions get loudest about the salary cap when teams start winning. We'll talk soon about the Dodgers and that they're paying more for one player than a couple of players teams play for their whole team. I think the questions will only start if the Dogs start smashing opponents with the talent they've got. I don't think that's happening just yet. They'll have to get rid of some players if Luai comes, that's for sure.
We'll probably finish on this one, Paul, for NRL. Mark St. John, the Fox Sports commentator, he must be worried about you. He's gone early. He's already made predictions about the 2024 season, trying to beat you and your predictions that will get off you early next year. He's also already said the Broncos will be minor premiers and also premiers. They'll play the Storm in the grand final. The Raiders will win the wooden spoon. So there you are. You've got some tips already to consider.
Yeah, I've got to say, I don't want to take the gloss off my predictions, but I am leaning towards the Broncos. And if you do want my feel-good story for NRL for the year, apart from the three-peat of the Panthers, which hasn't happened since 81 to 83, I think the rise of the Broncos is great for the game. And they have a team there that's going to be great for 5 to 10 years. I don't know if the Panthers can keep it going that long. So we could be on the verge of the Broncos becoming the next Panthers-type dynasty. And I have no qualms with tipping them at the top. And that's what you'll probably see most people do.
So in other words, he didn't tell us anything we don't already know.
not at the top, but at the bottom. I'm very surprised with that tip. Ricky Stewart was considered for the Blues role. He always gets the best out of his team, Sticky. So I'm surprised with that. There's some worse teams around than the Raiders, but I do have to put my mind to all that over the break.
All right, might come back to you with this next one, Dan. We've just seen a record MLB contract signed, $700 million over 10 years for Ohtani. He moves a little bit along the coastline in Los Angeles from the Angels to the Dodgers. That must have created a fair bit of news overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. Not even overnight, just 5 hours ago here in the United States, there was all kinds of rumors that he was going to the Toronto Blue Jays, on and down the list. But yes, 10 years, $700 million for a player that had major elbow surgery in September, that will not pitch in 2024, will only hit in 2024. But obviously two-time MVP in the American League, goes from Anaheim in Orange County to Los Angeles, just up the road in LA County. I don't think he has to worry about traffic, Mark, with that kind of contract. I think he could probably get his own driver or helicopter or whatever he wants to be able to get to games, but does not have to move. No moving expenses associated with that signing.
Dan, he's known as a two-way player, I see, which is what we'd call bat and bowl, but he can clearly bat and pitch. Is he top level in both disciplines?
Absolutely. When he was healthy, Judge, he could win the Cy Young and the MVP in the same year. He is an exceptionally good pitcher, but obviously an outstanding hitter as well. I don't know what's going to happen with him coming off this elbow injury that he sustained in September. He won't pitch in 24. Planning to pitch in 25. Obviously, the Tommy John type surgery has generally been relatively successful, but will he have the same speed? Will he have the same curve on the ball that he had before? But if he does, it's a heck of a signing. Ohtani's still somewhat young, but I just you kind of wonder, guys, where does it stop? $700 million for 10 years for a Major League Baseball player is crazy money, record money in many ways. It just, I don't know where anybody goes beyond that.
I was going to ask Dan, that's more than the two teams, the Orioles and the A's, pay their entire staff. Isn't there a luxury tax of some sort?
There is a luxury tax, but I don't think the Dodgers are too worried about paying it. Obviously, Mookie Betts and other players that they've signed, they've got some pretty good contracts hanging out there. But the Dodgers, I think they've won one title in 36 years, something like that. So it's not like they're doing what the Yankees do and being competitive mainly and winning championships quite frequently. This is a team that has not had great success in the last 40 years, and just really a surprise signing for that kind of money.
And he's been compared to Babe Ruth. Of course, we forget that Babe Ruth was as much a pitcher as he was a slugger. But isn't that the point, that Babe Ruth played, 100 years ago, 90 years ago? Does that sort of tell you that it's pretty hard to do both? That there's so many years between those sort of players?
Yeah, absolutely. As obviously players are much stronger, faster, obviously more players available now than there was 100 years ago. I mean, they're much more finely tuned athletes. I mean, Babe Ruth could smoke a cigarette and drink a drink in between innings and still go out there and be as good as he was at that time. You don't see any of that happening nowadays. Baseball is a much tougher sport than it was 90 years ago. It comes back to a generational player, and that's what Ohtani is.
I was going to say, Judge, they're saying he's the best two-way talent since Peter Allen. Sorry.
Oh, you get a mark for that, Paul, and you need
Thank
the points. Well done.
So, Dan, I did read that a lot of the contract is back-ended, which would give the Dodgers no problems with the luxury tax in the first number of years of the contract.
Yeah, the risk you take there, Mark, is obviously you have a player that's getting older as the contract gets bigger. And will he still have the talent that he has now? Will he have that when the contract gets to those last 7, 8, 9, 10 years? That's a long way off, gents.
And this is guaranteed money.
Yes.
Yeah. So he gets paid regardless.
Welcome to Major League Baseball contracts. Different than the NFL. The NFL contracts are not guaranteed. That's why you get the upfront money. Major League Baseball contracts are guaranteed.
We do have a similar situation here, though. When Buddy Franklin in the AFL signed for 10 years or 9 years for the Swans, there was just absolute outpouring of ridicule and scorn that how can he be as good in 9 years? Well, he ended just as good. I mean, there can be all this outcry about long deals, but if that's what the player wants, that's what the club's ready to. They're taking a punt, as are all contracts. I mean, 9 years for someone like that, or 10 years, may be less of a risk than 3 or 4 for someone else. You know?
Paul,
No, you're right there, Paul. And obviously, the Dodgers are willing to make that commitment. They put up the money and said, "Hey, we'll do 10 years." And obviously, the agents are doing great work out there getting these kind of contracts for these players.
And just to give you a comparison, Buddy Franklin's one of the best players that's played the game in the last 50 years. That contract Paul was talking about is essentially $1 million a year for 10 years. This guy is getting $100 million US a year. He's getting is it
70 million a year.
It's 100 million Australian. It's 10 million. It's extraordinary money.
Very much so. I mean, you think 456 million over 10 years is a big contract, which was the other bigger contract. Now this is 700 for the next player. Again, I don't know where the metrics are that show he's worth this, but again, the agents are doing their jobs and the teams are willing to pay it.
Are we going to see LeBron James ask for a pay rise?
Well, it became this year just became the all-time leading scorer in the NBA after 20 playing for 20 years. But yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, LeBron's talked about being fascinated about this in-season tournament for the NBA and making $500,000. So obviously, LeBron still likes his money.
The interesting part about it, Dan, is that Toronto Blue Jays were said to be in the running for getting Ohtani's services. And they were asked to comment on the contract. Their sole comment about it was, well, our number wasn't 699.
Again, it's one of those things that as agents go in there and they say, hey, they're offering this. Are you willing to pay more? There's who knows what the integrity, the ethics are in those discussions to say, hey, Toronto's willing to pay X. Toronto may have been offering $400 million, but hey, the Dodgers are willing to pay $700. So
they were going to throw in all the pancakes with maple syrup and bacon he could handle. So that's a shame.
All right, thanks for that one, Dan. Okay, listen, we might do our wrap up for the year and our in our opinion, were the big stories in sport for 2023. And Coutta, given that you're in danger down there in Cranbourne, we might go to you first so that you can bail out if you need to.
No, I've shifted suburbs now, Professor. I'm down the road in Narre-Warren. So I'm actually in an estate that's got golf names. I'm not sure there's a golf course near here, but currently on Player Drive, that's opposite Parry Court, next to Appleby Court. So just for the Australians out there. My highlight of the year, I don't think, and this you can go past the Matildas and what they did in Australia during the World Cup. Now, unfortunately, some of the media is finding their way about writing about the last two losses and the losses they've had and how that sort of overshadowed the World Cup. But I think from an Australian sporting perspective, the Women's World Cup in Australia and the success of the Matildas was definitely a highlight for the year.
Okay, thanks for that. Might go to you next, Paul.
Oh, as I said, the Brisbane Broncos, I love seeing their rise. They didn't quite get there this year, but it's great for sport and for Australia and rugby league that the powerhouse is on the rise. I think they're going to be great to watch and seeing the talent they've got there over the next few years.
Dan?
A lot of great stories in 2023. I think a lot of them in women's sports over here, Mark, in the U.S. I mean, obviously, Serena winning her 9th or 8th Wimbledon title was a big story this year. Brazil beating the U.S. in the Women's World Cup. The growth of women's basketball in the United States has been significant, particularly in the college basketball side with Caitlin Clark from the University of Iowa, showing her stardom in the NCAA tournament, making the national championship game last year. LeBron taking over the NBA's top scoring leader from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But I think the big story we're seeing, Mark, is the significant challenges facing NCAA sports moving ahead. The NCAA's faced a lot of issues this year, a lot of legal issues, a lot of threats, a lot of judicial cases. that are forthcoming, and I think that's going to be a big story heading into 2024.
Well, just on that one, Dan, I did see that your weekly bulletin did talk about that this week and all the meetings that you've had surrounding that.
Yeah, we had league meetings last week amongst the Big West, our anything from our athletic directors to our board of directors. We talked a lot about legal threats and things that will impact not only the NCAA but the Big West moving forward. Some big cases here that will start in December 2024 and January 2025. But obviously the NCAA, the president of the NCAA earlier this week put forth a proposal to start paying players for their use of their name, image, and likeness, not just for companies to do it, but institutions to be able to do that as well as part of academic enhancements. So it's going to be a pretty bumpy ride for the membership in the NCAA here in the months ahead.
Question without notice, Dan. You knew you were going to get one of these before the end of the year. You've had longevity in college sport, and you're very well experienced. Let me take you back to when the young Dan Butley first walked into a collegiate office and started his career, coming through to today, and look at what's happened. How does the young fellow who went into the collegiate office first make sense of everything that's happened since?
It's absolutely impacted into many ways the benefit of the student athlete, which has been great, Mark, in many ways. I mean, when I was at Illinois State University back in 89 to 92 time period, players got a scholarship, they got room and board, and they got books. They didn't get anything beyond that. Now these players get cost of attendance, which could be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in additional monies. They get a significant amount of medical attention, insurances, and everything else to secure their future, tutoring, academics to make sure they graduate. There's a significant amount of benefits there for student athletes, and now being able to profit off their name, image, and likeness to be able to make some money. Student athletes couldn't work when I was back at Illinois State in the early 90s. Couldn't work. You didn't have time to work. Now these student athletes have social media. There's a lot more pressure on them. They have a bad performance. Social media is having a negative impact on student athletes' mental health in many ways, but it's also having a positive opportunity for them too to make hundreds of dollars, if not millions of dollars, in the NCAA sports space nowadays.
So better off now than then.
For student athletes, it's absolutely better off, correct.
How about for administrators?
Administrators, it's a different challenge every day. And that's the thing, Mark. You try to improve things for student athletes, but once you try to improve something, another legal threat's put on top of the NCAA. So it's not easy being an administrator in college athletics right now. It's crazy the number of people that are getting out of the business from the professional side and looking for other opportunities.
All right, Dan. Judge, your 2023 sports story of the year?
Yeah, I agree with Coutta in terms of Australia. I think the Matildas was just way better than what we thought, it would be or could be. But I think the biggest story in the year was LIV golf. Just where that's going. It was around last year, but it's really come to the fore this year. I think the involvement of the Saudis is fascinating. I see John Rahm's just signed up for $300 million. And you talk about your baseballer. This is just a sign-on fee of $300 million US. So, and that's obviously a story that's got a lot to run. But this year they really made a mark, and they've really shaken up one of the most, the organisations in most need of shake-up, the PGA. So I think that was a big story.
Okay, mine was the decline in Australian rugby. Actually found and had the microscope put on it in 2023. Only have to look at the performance of the Wallabies prior to the World Cup. During the World Cup, the only teams they could beat were the powerhouses of Georgia and Portugal. They lost an important game to Fiji. They didn't make it out of the pool system for the first time ever. They've then got the fiasco of Eddie Jones and his coaching appointment. It just seems to be that Australian rugby might never recover from this, and I'd be interested to know what you think of it, Judge. Well,
as somebody who probably, sorry, Paul, but I prefer union to league, but you compare the respective trajectories from, say, I don't know, that World Cup, the Johnny Wilkinson World Cup of 15 years ago, where it was going then to where it's going now, and where rugby league is going now. You wouldn't have predicted it that many years ago, and I think it's actually quite a sad development. I think that Australian rugby just has got no idea what it's trying to do. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Judge, I think the other thing with union is that it's nearly unwatchable with the rules and the intricacies of the game. Like, if the commentators don't know what the rules are, then how are we expected to know what the rules are? And I think that's part of it, that they've kept changing the rules. Now, we're critical of the AFL and how they have rule changes all the time, but rugby union's certainly in the same case, and that's where I think they're struggling to get the new viewership or the new people watching it, because no one knows the rules. And
nothing more frustrating, Coutta. Nothing more frustrating for a spectator when the players actually genuinely don't know what the rules are. And we see that in Aussie rules at the moment, because they change the bloody rules every season. I couldn't agree with you more. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, and the other thing, obviously, with the union was that the team that won the World Cup didn't score a try.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Dan, got to say thank you very much for making your time available this year. Very, very busy as the commissioner of the Big West, but we really appreciate it. And I saw on my Facebook timeline, and you picked it up as well, that yesterday or the day before was the anniversary, the 15-year anniversary of you making your first appearance on Sportsfan Radio.
That's absolutely crazy. And the first appearance on social media as well. I believe I got peer pressured into joining. So, yeah, absolutely a pleasure to be a part of this year, gents. Great to see you. Wish I was there in person, and maybe next year we can do so.
Yeah. Gentlemen, you'll all be pleased to know that we've been renewed for 2024.
Oh, very good.
700 million?
Yeah, so is the contract
What's your sign-on fee, Coutta?
I think it might be a bit less than 700 million, but I might, what is it? Name, image, likeness. I'll see how that goes. We might look into that.
How about we discuss it at our meeting on Wednesday evening? That might be a good place to start.
Topic.
Mark, sad to say that Paul only got 10.5 zingers today. He would have got 11, but one of them was a pun, and it's not a zinger. So you lose a half a point. Sorry, Paul, but try better next year.
Do better.
Gives you something to strive for in 2024, Paul.
I was going to ask Matty to throw me in the air and catch me at 6'4" and nearly 100 kilos. So I'd like to see that happen, but it might be on her, I think.
The voting stop.
Thanks for your contributions during the year, gentlemen, and we'll be back in 2024.
Thank you.
Till then.